guys, how are you? I'm good. I am great. Welcome to another episode of Evil Lives Here. So, for those of you that continue to return, thank you. I love you. You guys don't know how much it means to me to have your support. Yes, as I kick everything and cause a mess. Sorry, that's just me. For the newbies, you get used to it. So now, what is Evil Lives Here? Well, it's a TV show on the Investigative Discovery Channel. I have been watching this show from season 1 to now, and I sit down and I watch it. I make my little notes over here. You'll see me look at. And then we discuss it while I do my makeup. This is a beauty channel. I think I mention this almost every episode, but it is a beauty channel. I do the makeup to help keep my hands occupied as we discuss pretty horrible things in people. So it's what I do to cope. I hope, you know, it is what it is. Anyways, today's episode. So it is... for those of us that are parents, it is a true determination of what we do not want to do as parents. Like, yeah, so awful, so awful. So this is season 4, episode 6, titled Master Manipulator. And it was originally aired September 17th, 2018. So we'll get ready to get right into this. But first, just want to say that I don't talk about any of the makeup that I'm using. It's all here. You'll see me use it. I might grumble here and there as I do it, but I don't discuss it. I have a Get Ready With Me that is perfect for that. If you want to check those out, we discuss makeup. We discuss looks. We discuss things like that. This, we're discussing the Evil Lives Here. However, I will list everything below, what I'm using. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Also, quickly, don't forget to check out my ambassador links. I do have some links down below of some really great products that I love and use daily. And I have discount codes. As much as I love it, I want to share those discount codes with you. Don't forget to hit that. And let's get right into it. So, this show immediately starts out, or this episode, with the guy sitting at a table. And this, usually, for those of you that are not familiar with the premise of Evil Lives Here, so you hear from 1, 2 different people, usually different times, and very rarely are they together telling their story. This case, though, I think would be the first time I can say that they're together. So we'll get to about who that is. But what they do is they sit usually at this table and they discuss the events of this episode. So basically they lived this. They're telling us their story, their side of events, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's what we do. That's what they do. So we're sitting there and we're looking, or this guy's sitting there. He's going to be our narrator, one of the 2 narrators. And he's looking at a picture. And I'm assuming it's his mother because he's a younger, I really don't know how old he is. I didn't check. But he's younger, so I want to assume this woman is his mother. Because then he makes the comment, he says, you're born from a woman. You start out as, and she starts out as your mother, and you would think that you would love your mother no matter what. He said he loves the idea of having a mother. But when he sees this picture, or when he sees her, he doesn't love her as his mother. And when he sees her, he can't help but feel hatred and rage. And I'm like, oh, that's awful. You know, anybody to have hatred and rage is awful, in my opinion. To have it towards a parent is just... So apparently she's in jail. And the reason I say that is he says this now, and he goes back at the end and closes with the same statement, basically. But he says, this is why I think she's in jail. He says he gets often asked if he ever sees her. And he says he never wants to see her again. So, now, Evil live here during this episode. They pop up and they give us little bits of information and things that are kind of important to the story. Or help. I'm struggling with talking today. We'll get past this. But the Evil episode gives us stuff that is important to the story or leads you in the correct direction. Does that make sense? So now it's popping up and it tells us that Jamie Cargill and his father, Brian, will never forget the day Kimberly Cargill was sentenced to death. So Jamie is the son, Brian is his father, and like I said, and probably the first time I've ever seen it, Jamie and Brian will sit together in a lot of this episode and talk together. So now, one of the good things that Evil Lives Here does is you actually see footage, like whether it be, you know, newspaper or TV news report. Well, now we're actually seeing part of the trial. And it's actual footage. And it looks like they're in a courtroom. And the first thing you see is this lady on the screen, she's like, I'm assuming a lawyer, because she says, and she's very loudly saying, and I quote, "Evil exists out there. What it looks like is right there in the purple shirt," and pointing, end quote, and she's pointing at Kimberly. Okay. So the lawyer is saying Kimberly is evil on earth. Evil incarnate. Okay. And since I'm just now learning this story, and I don't know much about it except for what they've told us, Kimberly is the bad guy, Jamie's the son, Brian's the dad. I really don't know much more. So I don't know time period. So I can guess by looking at the court and knowing that there's actual court footage, looking at the way they're dressed, the women's hairs, I believe this is the 90s. Like, this is a very 90s vibe that is going on here. It doesn't say yet. But that's just where I'm at from what I'm seeing. And Jamie's watching the video. And he sees this part where she's, you know, vehemently calling Kimberly evil. And Jamie's like, yeah, no, I agree with her 100%. Okay. And now the dad joins. So Brian, the dad, is sitting with Jamie, and Jamie's saying that what his mother did was a finely executed murder. And he says it takes an evil, vile person to do what she did. And knowing now, like when I take my notes, I don't know anything, but knowing now, not only what she did, but who she did it to. Okay. So now we are going through some pictures. And like I said, Evil Lives Here does such an amazing job showing actual, you know, not only footage, but now we're seeing pictures of Kimberly and Brian and their kids. And they're just such a nice looking family. Kimberly is a very attractive young lady. And she's in this picture with a small child, which I'm assuming it's Jamie. I do believe I get confirmation of that later because this picture does come back up. And, you know, but you could tell she kind of really takes care of herself. Like every picture she's done up, she's nicely, her hair. And I don't know if you're from the 90s, you know what I'm talking about, but she had the bouffant going. Like the hair in the front, curly. I mean, she had the typical 90s hair. So, looking at these pictures of her and her perfect family, you're like, she doesn't look evil. She doesn't look evil at all. What's going on? But you know, as I'm writing this, because I'm watching this show, I stopped myself because I'm like, what exactly does evil look like? I mean, we have seen some of the worst people be some of the most attractive people we've seen. You know, we've seen some of the worst people in this world that are very outgoing, friendly, you know, people are just drawn to them. So, what exactly does evil look like? Because I don't know. It's a scary world out there, peeps. I don't know why I said that, but hey. Well, I don't know why I said peeps. Okay. Anyways, let's get back to the story. Now Brian's talking to us. And he's looking at his family picture. And the picture has a young Brian, Kimberly, and baby Jamie. And it looks like 2 other kids. And none of those are mentioned yet. So I'm not really 100% sure who. I know who one of them turns out to be. I don't know who the other one is. Anyways. Sometimes when you just don't get the full information, it's hard. Okay. So he says it's really the only picture that they have as a family. So I'm just going to say this whole family thing, this whole dynamic started off rough. Like, even from the beginning, it started off. And you know, thankfully, Brian was smart enough to cut and run as quickly as he realized that things aren't what they seem. But at the same time, it did go on a little bit longer than should have. Anyways, let's get to the story. So Brian's talking about the picture, and he calls it a false reality. He said it's what Kimberly, I think he called her Kimberly most of the time. I don't know if anybody actually called her Kim. But it's what Kimberly wanted people to see. The perfect family, kids, whatever. He said, but that was so far from what they were. He said it was, you know, they just weren't. It was not a nice, happy family. There was not a kumbaya moment. It was toxic. That's a good word for it. So, yeah. Now, Evil Lives Here Again tells us that Brian Cargill never imagined that Kimberly's controlling behavior would lead to murder. But there had been signs. Okay, so it's something they say every episode. And I've just kind of leaned into it the last couple of ones that I've done. Anyways, so Brian's going to tell us how they met. And basically, he's newly divorced, she's newly divorced, and a mutual friend set them up on a blind date. Not much of a friend. Anyways, they went to see a movie. They went to see I Married an Axe Murderer. And he starts chuckling. He's like, I am not making that up. And I just was like, wow. Okay. Okay. And, he says they really hit it off. They, he talked about all the great things about her that you hear every time about a psychopath murderer. And I'm not going to repeat them because honestly, everybody's so sweet. Everybody's so nice. It's, so if there was something new, I would have said it. And there wasn't. Anyways, so he says, and it kind of hit me out of the blue because I wasn't expecting it, that he had a young child. So he says, well, I had a young child and she liked the idea of that. And then I'm like, huh? But then he says, I was recently divorced and she was recently divorced. Then I went, makes a little bit more sense. Okay. Because I mean, he says he has a child before he talks about being recently divorced. So it was throwing me off a little bit. But she liked the idea that he had a child. It was not a deal breaker. And what I find out later, and I'm talking much later, but I'm going to say it now because it kind of really confused me. It comes up in a point. It confused me because it's never mentioned. Like, it's not even an issue, and I'm sure it had to have been. But she also had a child. Okay. I don't know anything more than that at this point. And honestly, I didn't even know it at this point, but I feel like I needed to say it because it was such a confusing fact moving forward. Anyway, she loved the idea of him having a child, and she always wanted to be a mother, which is why this is confusing. And she always wanted to be a mother, but she did have a child. And, she was really all about that happily ever after, the fairy tale, everything being perfect. And he very much says that that's exactly how she was. Everything had to be a certain way. Everything had to be her way, whatever. We get more into that. But he says, they had a lot in common and they started dating. And then he says the earliest that he saw a sign was only a couple weeks into, he saw a sign that there was something not quite right. Was a couple weeks into the relationship. And personally, I'm like, red flag, red flag, red flag. You are still early enough in this relationship. You should cut and run. I don't know. That's me. I really would have been like, I don't know if I'd put up with this. So he tells us that, a couple of weeks into their dating, she invites him to a support group that she's in for recently divorced people. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm going to support her. Of course, he was recently divorced. I don't know if, kind of get the feeling she was struggling with it a little bit, which is why she was seeing a support group. He wasn't at that point out of his divorce, I guess, but he was going to support her. And he shows up. And he gets there earlier than her, because she's running late. So he's like, I'm just going to go ahead and sit down in the room and wait for him. And that's what he did. He went in, he sat down, no big deal in his opinion. And she finally gets there. And he's sitting in a chair where there's an empty one beside him, right? She decides not to sit there. She decides she's going to sit across the room from him and kind of stare him down the whole time. Just kind of giving these evil looks. And he's like, I kind of got the feeling she was mad at me. But he said, I don't know why. He's like, I'm there for her. I'm there to support her. And now she's mad. So then afterwards, oh yeah, she's mad. How dare he go into her meeting without her? And he's like, I meant no disrespect or harm. He's like, I'm here for you. I was just early, so I came in and sat down. And she was totally pissed, like set off. I do not like my eyes. He was totally set off, totally mad because he went on and sat down and waited for her. And I mean, and she's letting him have it. I mean, she's yelling at him, and he said it was just such a small thing, and her attitude just completely flipped. Like, there was no other word for it. It just completely flipped. And he's like, I honestly had no idea what I was supposed to be doing or saying. And then in the middle of the argument, which, you know, he's like, it really wasn't an argument for me. She's sitting there mad at me and I'm not saying anything, but, you know, he's talking to her and he's trying to de-escalate it. And just to get her to understand he meant no harm. You know, he was there to support her, whatever. And he said it was like a switch, just flipped. So one minute she's yelling, the next minute she becomes very like romantic and passionate, is what he called it. And it was kind of like the whole, she would be like, oh my God, though, it was so sweet of you to come, and I appreciate you showing up, and whatever. And he's like, okay. I mean, you know, you're getting yelled at, and then just as quickly, the switch has been flipped, and she's love bombing you. And he's like, he swears that she did it so they would completely forget about what they were arguing about. And basically, she wins the argument and it's done and over with. And I can't imagine just how difficult living with someone like that would be. I really can't. So he says that it wasn't until they actually progressed in the relationship and moved in together that he started to discover more disturbing sides of her personality. So I would have been like really questioning the whole episode after the therapy session, right? I honestly, I would have been up in arms, kind of keeping my eye open. But he moves on. They move in, and he tells us the story. Whew, okay. She's psycho. Like, she is certified psycho. So he had to have his gallbladder out. And he was home, laying on the couch, and, you know, he said I had just taken his medicines and, you know, relaxing after surgery. And I don't know how much after surgery. It could have been hours. It could have been the next day, whatever. Anyways, Kimberly comes in and she's mad. So Brian said, I had changed my daughter. So he had a young daughter's diaper, and threw her diaper away in the diaper pail. I'm like, okay, tell me more. And it was the wrong diaper pail. She had this diaper pail saved for something else. Okay. So now let's not forget that old dude is changing his baby's diaper after having surgery. So there's that. He's not just laying in bed. He got up to take care of his child. And she's mad. Not that he just left a diaper out. He threw it away, but he threw it in the wrong place. And he says she lost her shit, which seems to be a very common thing that you will hear. She lost her shit. So, so she had lost her mind over this, and she's yelling at him and really downgrading him, right? And he just had surgery. So he says after that, because he didn't feel like listening to it, to be honest. He, was still struggling. But after that, when it was time for his next medicine, he said he got up and went to the bathroom to get his medicine, and all his bottles were empty. He said, and it'd be like, I knew I should have had some left, but they were empty. And he's like, I never thought that she was the kind of person that would deliberately do something like that to anybody, but he always knew she was the one that did it. Okay. So now, Evil Lives Here tells us that Brian decided to end the relationship, but Kimberly had other plans. Of course she did. And he's like, I tried to break up with her. I tried to break with her so many times, and somehow she would always convince me to stay. And he said, in this one time, he said, I was done. He said, I had it. And I was telling her, I'm over, it's over, whatever. And she drops the whole, I'm pregnant on him, right? And he's like, I was so shocked because she had told him when they got together that she can never have another kid. So she had a child, and it was a high-risk pregnancy. Now, I do not know the specifics to any of this, and knowing what I do now, I think the woman has makes up her own, stuff to feed whatever needs she has. So she had told him that she couldn't have any more kids because her pregnancy was high risk and it would be dangerous for her and the baby. However, she's pregnant. And he's telling her, well, he's like, we do not have to be together. I will still be a part of this baby's life. And she's like, oh, hell no, you won't. Basically, she told him if he wanted, anything to do with the baby, he had to marry her. Okay. And he does. Very manipulating. Very, very manipulating. Master manipulator. Remember the title of the show. So he says he believes wholeheartedly that she got pregnant on purpose. And I believe wholeheartedly he's probably right, knowing what we know now. So, I didn't get any of this out. He says the wedding was not a happy time for him. Okay. I honestly would have been more shocked if he had said that it was the best day of his life. It was a joyous occasion, whatever. No, it was not a good day. And now we go back to the same picture that I had seen earlier that I said I thought was Kimberly holding Jamie, and it is. And Brian says this picture shows Kimberly with Jamie after the first few hours of Jamie's life. And Brian says Jamie's birth represented to him what he hoped would be hope, a new start, that things would get better now, things could change for them. That was his hope. But no sooner did he say that, did Evil Lives Here come up and say that as Jamie got older, Kimberly's violent temper grew worse. And Brian would discover that they both would be lucky to get out alive. You know, Evil Lives Here is so dramatic. But honestly, okay, I need to do my eyelashes off camera. Okay, now that I got that on, Brian now tells us a story of basically just proving how freaking psycho Kimberly is. So he talks about one night he come home from work late. And he said he did it occasionally. You know, it's, you went to work and you stayed till the job was done. Now, I don't know what he did. I think I read somewhere that Kimberly was like an office clerk, whatever. But it's never really specified either. So anyways, he comes home late from work and he's ready to lay down. Like he's ready for sleep. He's tired. He's had a long day, whatever. And he said that Kimberly had a really bad habit of talking to him once he got in and laid down for bed. And I chuckled here because my poor husband, I do that. Like he lays down and it's like I remember 100 things I need to say to him. And then I'll be talking and I'm like, oh, you need to go to sleep. You know, it's been a long day. You're tired. But apparently, Kimberly didn't care that he was tired. So she just kept going on. And it wasn't in anything. He said it was just like stuff around the house. Like I think in the reenactment, and I got to chuckle because, you know, he's been at work. He's come home. He's going to bed. And she's like, did you fix the dishwasher? You know, he said it was always things like that. And it's stuff that, you know, they really need to talk about when they are up and about and doing things, not when they're going to sleep. But she went and quit. And on and on and on. And he's like, I've had enough. I need to go to sleep. So he gets up. He's going to leave the bed. Oh, hell to the no. You do not walk away from Miss Kimberly when she is in her mood. So she's yelling at him. She's calling him names. She had a really bad habit of calling everybody really awful names. And I won't even get into it because the stories that they said her children. I mean, it's just awful. So she's pissed. She's throwing a temper tantrum. She's calling him these awful names. And he's trying just to leave the room. He wants to go to another room and lay down. She's not letting him. And she gets so mad. He said her rage would just be like instant. Like, it was just unbelievable how quick she would go from 0 to 100. And she picked up a hammer and threw it at him. He said, first of all, I don't even know where she found a hammer. Why there was a hammer on her dresser. 2, he said, she meant to kill me. I have no doubt she meant to kill me. He was able to dodge. And she threw that hammer so hard, it embedded itself in the wall. And he said it was the first time that he'd been in a situation where he thought she was going to kill him. Or anybody, for that matter, was trying to kill him. Yeah, that's rough. And then, to, rub it in a little bit, I guess. I don't know if I'd say that, but Evil Lives Here, the producers hand him a picture. And he's looking at it. And it's a picture of this hammer. I mean, they're showing it to us. It's a picture of this hammer stuck into the wall. And he says he took a picture of it for proof. Don't really quite know what he was trying or hoping at that point the proof would be. But he took it for proof. But we're literally seeing this picture. And it's literally eye level. He said she was aiming for his head. And he says that, yeah, he just left it in the wall. And Kimberly just left it in the wall. So he said he's not sure why Kimberly left it, but for him it was symbolic. Like, I don't know. And then they were married 1 full year. And it just seems like with the stories he's told and everything, it was a whole lot longer. But after 1 year, he filed for divorce and left. At least he didn't stay longer. And I wish I could say, end of story. She's a bad person, but they got out. However, he says it's hard to say if he actually ever really knew Kimberly. Kind of surprised me when he said this, because it didn't surprise me when he said he didn't really know her. I mean, I don't really know if anybody knew her. She was quite psycho. But he says the potential for her to murder somebody had been there all along. And I'm like, the stories I'm hearing is somebody with a really bad temper, rage issues, unable to control. I don't know if I consider that murderous, but I don't know. So, he says after the divorce, he got custody of Jamie. Yay! And I'm like, that's really good. And he's like, this nightmare is going to be over. I've got my son, whatever. But, you know, I know, we know, this is Evil Lives Here. And it's not going to be that easy. And unfortunately, it's not. Now, I will say, we're getting ready to hear a lot from Jamie. And he was not an easy kid. But, you know, most kids aren't. I mean, I honestly, as a mother, have made jokes that probably were not quite jokes about, you know, my daughter and I hating each other from the time she was 15 to 16. And when my son turned 17, I didn't know which one of us would come out alive. You know, it's just phases for kids, right? And as a parent, you deal with it. You go through it. You live through it. And it's just a matter of how we do all of that that counts. And I might not have been the best mother. I might not have been the best anything. But I'm better than this psycho. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. So, Brian and Jamie are together now and telling this story. And it looked like a lot of teenage angst, like I said. But this was the first story they told me. They told us. And it really kind of gives us an idea of what to expect. So, Jamie was living with his dad. Okay. And you could tell he was a teenager. Don't know. He's a young teenager, maybe 13, according to the reenactment. I will say, I don't know ages. And they're sitting there watching TV. And Jamie's like done. He don't want to watch this anymore. And in teenagers' mind, what they want, they get, doesn't matter. So he's like, Dad, change the channel. I don't want to watch this. And Dad's like, no, I'm watching this TV channel. You're just going to have to wait. Or this TV show, whatever, right? And an argument ensues because Dad will not change it. And Jamie thinks it should be changed because he said so. So in all of Jamie's brilliant logic, he decides he's going to stand in front of the TV, block the show so Dad can't watch it, and of course he'll change the channel. Well, don't know if that's ever worked for anybody, but it did not work for Jamie. And Dad got up to remove him from in front of the TV. And a pushing match started. And anyways, pushing match started. Jamie fell, hit his head on like the corner of a coffee table, something like that. And yeah, so he calls his mom. And Jamie says, my mother was a master manipulator. And I have to wonder if he knew this when he called her. Had it resonated in his mind, what probably would happen? So, Mom and Dad are now pitted against each other. Obviously, Jamie's at his mom's, and his mother goes and gets a lawyer and has Jamie write down word for word what happened. Okay? What happened between him and his father. And she also kind of helped fill in a few places that he might not have been 100% sure what happened. So yeah, she's kind of telling him what to add to this story. Okay. And then Brian comes on, and he actually has this letter handwritten by his son. And they're showing it to us. I'm not going to read it all, but he does read part of it. And to a point, it's exactly what they told us already. They're watching TV. He doesn't want to watch it no more. He gets in front of the TV, whatever. And then it says that Dad got mad, gets up from the couch, picks Jamie up by his sweat or t-shirt, and body slams him to the ground. And it's not funny. It's not. But because you can physically see Brian sitting there after he's reading this and just completely devastated, right? Even now, even all these years later, reading what his son wrote, he's devastated. And he knows, we know, Jamie had some help writing this. But it doesn't matter. As a parent, seeing what that your kid is writing something like that about you, I couldn't imagine. It'd be devastating. It would be devastating. So, he's telling us that, I never picked him up by the shirt. I never body slammed him. But he says Kimberly was such a good manipulator that she would take just a grain of truth, just a little bit of truth, and then twist it and turn it how she wanted it. And that's what she did here. And she had Jamie write that. And because it suited her needs. You know? And honestly, a little off topic here, but haven't we all met someone like that? I mean, come on. You have to. They're everywhere. I have. But I don't know if I've never met a murderess, you know, someone that does that and is a murderer, but I'm pretty sure they go hand in hand. So, yeah, after that affidavit that Jamie wrote, Dad lost his custody, and Brian lost custody, and Jamie moved back home with Kimberly. And now Evil Lives Here comes back up and tells us that once Jamie is back home alone with Kimberly, he starts to bear the brunt of her rage. So now he's telling us, Jamie is telling us that he had a really weird relationship with his mom. Like, at the beginning of the show, it's obvious he detests her. If you were watching what he was saying and how he was acting, he cannot stand his mother. But they went through this whole period that wasn't the case, right? He say 1 minute she was loving and just such a good mom, and the next minute she was just like, and he would say it would take just the littlest things. So he was telling this kind of story, like he would come home from school and his mom would be so happy to see him. Come sit with me, come talk to me, tell me how school was, type of thing, right? And then she would like maybe notice he had a stain on his shirt and lose her ever-loving mind and start yelling at him and calling him names, like really bad names, and saying just, stuff mothers should never, ever say to their children, but hey, anyways. So yeah, he said it would just flip on and off like a switch. It was just the weirdest thing. And he's telling this story, and she's yelling at him, calling him names over a stain on his shirt. And finally, he's like, I hate you. I hate you. I don't want to live here. I can't, I can't live here with you anymore, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, fine. And literally pushes him out of the house and locks the door. So she's locked him out. And this is kind of heartbreaking because Evil Lives Here actually has audio of the call. So when Jamie is out, he calls his dad. I guess he goes to a neighbor's house and calls. He wouldn't have had a cell phone. And calls his father to come pick him up and ask him, he's outside, he's cold, he can't get in. Please come pick me up. And it's just crazy because it's his voice, this little kid's voice we are listening to as adult Jamie and Brian are sitting in front of us. They are listening to this video recording. And I'm just blown away. Blown away. But Brian said I had to tell him I couldn't because of the court order. He could not interfere and go get, I don't even know what all the rules were, but he couldn't go get his son. And you know, he said it was just awful. But he said if he knew that if he did do something like that, he would lose all chances of ever getting Jamie back to live with him. So he was really trying to follow the court order and not violate anything that would prevent him from getting his son back. But it, like I said, it's just heartbreaking because there's actual video of this boy being thrown out of his home and calling his father for help. I can't imagine how scared the kid was and just how traumatized Dad was that he couldn't do anything and get anybody to help him. I just can't. I just can't. So anyways, Brian says, you know, when things like that happen, and apparently things like that happened a lot, he would call the cops and ask them to help Jamie because he couldn't. But the cops would always tell him there's nothing they could do. There wasn't a criminal matter. And then Brian says what all of us think. He says it's a true shame. Is that the true shame of it all is a kid has to be physically injured, obviously injured, for the police to step in and help. And isn't that the truth? I have been saying that was wrong for a very long time. But so even Brian tried to get help from the cops and nobody could help him. Okay, so Jamie now is telling us a story. And I do chuckle because I think all of us have either been there as a kid or as an adult, but with your children. It's picture day. And his mom was very, very much gung-ho about it. So like, what I mean by that is like, he had the collared button-up shirt that was perfectly pressed. He had the jeans shorts, I think is actually what they were wearing. He had the shorts that were clean and, like I said, just pressed perfectly. His shoes had to be immaculately white, right? And she was doing his hair. And he said she was in the bathroom and she was parting his hair right down the middle and she was just brushing, used a half a bottle of hairspray to get his hair in that position. And he hated it. And, yeah, Mama, come on. So he said he went to school and messed his hair up before pictures. No big deal until pictures come in. And yeah, she had paid $40 for those pictures and his hair was messed up and she was livid. Like, again with the names and again with just awful, awful things. And he tells us, this is the first time he tells us that she actually beat him. So he said that, you know, she was smacking him 30, 40 times. She had him pinned up against the wall. And she said when he said when she would hit him, she would hit him in his stomach or somewhere because it would always be somewhere that you couldn't see. And he said, he regrets now that he never said anything or told his dad. So he never told his dad about the beatings. And Jamie said he kept it a secret for many, many years. And Brian comes on and he's like, you know, he was a rambunctious kid and he always had bruises, but I would have never thought, you know, they were from Kimberly. He said, I thought it was wrestling with his brothers or, you know, playing with his school kids. He said, never did I think. And that's just heartbreaking. Because no, we shouldn't be thinking or have to think that the bruises on our child are coming from a parent. Okay. Eva lives here tells us now. And they actually popped up and told us a lot throughout this show. And they don't always tell us this much. So they had some things to say. But it tells us now that Kimberly had 2 more kids from 2 more dads. So 2 different relationships that didn't work out, but she got pregnant. So again, she went from I can't have kids because the doctor said I'd never have kids after my first child because of the high-risk pregnancy, getting pregnant with Jacob, and now she has 2 more kids, and they tell us their names. So you know how I feel about learning the names in these shows. I just hate knowing their names because that's just never a good thing. But their names were Zach and Luke. And I'm really hoping that us finding out their names doesn't mean anything. So, okay. Jamie talks about, at this point, all the chores that he and his brother had to do. One of the brothers was really young, so it was basically him and Zach had to do a lot of chores. And he's like, he named them off, everything that had to be done while, you know, doing homework and other things. And if it wasn't done just right, they'd get punished. And he said that Kimberly would come by after whatever, and she would check all the chores to make sure they were done just right. And if they weren't, they were punished and they had to redo them. And he said that she would lock them in the room. And he said, you know, normally you have a lock on the inside, right? Not Kimberly. He said that she would unscrew the doorknob and switch the lock to the outside, which effectively locked him inside. And she would keep him there for hours. And he said they would miss dinner. They would miss they would go there for hours. So they wouldn't get dinner and wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom. He said it got so bad that it's not funny. It's really not. It's absolutely devastating. But it was so bad, he kicked the screen out of his window and peed out his window. And he says he knew that kind of normal or behavior wasn't normal, but he thought that's how you were punished. He thought that was what happened when you got grounded. So Jamie's talking, and he's like, you know, things were not good at home. He did not have a good relationship with his mom. He was kind of stuck there because his dad couldn't help. And he kind of hid into his Xbox just to get away from his mother, right? And I want to just give a trigger warning. This next part might be actually the worst part of the whole story, and it's not even the what actually happened that we're here for. But So he said he would be playing Xbox. And his mom would get mad at him and come in and want him to turn it off. And of course, like I said, he was a teenager and he was like, nope, I am not turning this off. Whatever. And then she would go and unplug it. And then mistakes were made all the way around. He got mad, picked up the Xbox after untangling the cords and threw it out the window, shattering the glass. And he said, what was it? She got into a blind rage and did something he never expected. She took the cords from the Xbox, wrapped it around his neck, and started choking him. Pulled back on it, choking him, the whole 9 yards. And he's fighting for his life. He's like, it's getting black. I'm starting to, can't breathe. I'm gasping. He said, and Luke was in the room. I don't know how old Luke was. Luke was younger. And Luke starts yelling, Mommy, Mommy, stop choking him. And eventually she does. Lets Jamie go. And he runs and calls 911. And I want to pay attention to this because it's really rough. But, where's it at? He said, and this is really sad, that he was under the impression that the police were supposed to help you. So when the police got there, the mom blamed everything on Jamie. And said that he was out of control and she was the victim. He pushed her against the wall. He jumped on top of her, etc., etc., etc. And, you know, Jamie was like, I was trying to tell my side of the story and they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear it. And at this point, I'm like, how come nobody asked Zach? Zach was there, right? Well, Jamie says that his mom manipulated Zach as well to say pretty much what she wanted him to say. So it became 2 against 1 where the cops were concerned. So it was Luke and, not Luke, I apologize, Zach and Kimberly telling the cops one thing and he's telling them another. And, you know, then Jamie actually defends Zach. He said, you know, he was just a kid. He was just a little kid, and their mom really kind of put him in a position where he had to agree with her, and he didn't blame him. I know, I'm sure at that time, maybe not so much, but as an adult, and I can appreciate that. He said that Zach was just a confused little kid. He doesn't blame him. He blames his mom for manipulating his brother, excuse me. Jamie then says, when you have a parent like that, they can weave in and out of people's heads, and they manipulate and say what they want you to do and hear and how. And he says he doesn't even blame the cops. They were also being manipulated by his mom. That's what she did to people. So he got a citation for assault, but it was later dismissed. They never said what or why or how. But then Kimberly threatened to kill him. If he told anybody, his dad, his friends, his teachers, anyone, she would kill him. And he believed her. Okay, now, I'm almost done with the makeup here. Jamie is looking at another picture of him, his mom, and another sibling, which I don't know who the sibling is. The other siblings really are not talked about like a total lot. But Jamie says if you look at the picture, you can see how happy they are, or how happy Kimberly wanted everybody to think they are, right? He said that he remembers when this picture was taken, how much he just wanted to get away from her. And he was pretty young in that picture, if I remember correctly. Like before preteen. And so he tells another story, and it kind of just jumps around from that to the picture. And now he is a teenager in school, and he had gotten in trouble with the principal and was sent to the principal's office, and they were calling his mom. Well, he was terrified of what his mom would do, not being in trouble at school. So he decided to run away. And he was going to hide and try to not see his mother. It's not very well thought out. But he says that because of the consequences of what his mother was going to do when he got in trouble, he decided to run. And he ran away and hid at a grocery store. So he kind of went into like one of those back rooms and just hid there until about 8 or 9 o'clock, right? And he was hoping he could hide from his mom, or maybe find somebody that could offer him help. He was found by the store manager later that night. And the store manager was really nice, he said. Really cool, but he had to call the cops. He thought he needed to call the cops. He kept telling Jamie, cops will help you, cops will help you. Well, about 20, 30 minutes after getting there, the cops took him back home. And Jamie said he ran away maybe 5 or 6 times in all. And it was always taken back to her. And the cops started to even threaten to take him to juvie. And I'm like, I'm sure he was okay with that. Take him. But they never did. They just kept taking him back home. Now, I have to ask this because I honestly don't know. What are the rules for when a kid runs away from the home so many times? Like, is it flagged? Every time the cops are being called out and they find him and take him back home, wouldn't that leave some kind of log? Wouldn't someone say, this has happened 6 times, maybe we should talk to Child Protective Services? Maybe something's going on. And it could simply be the kid's a problem. And if that's the case, wouldn't they think maybe he needed to get help somewhere else? I don't know. I really don't have the answer. So I'm very curious. Please let me know how this is done, because I have to think someone seeing this kid continuously running away would think it was a call for help. And somebody could have stood up and said, yeah, maybe we shouldn't take him home. Maybe he needs to go see a therapist. Maybe he needs to go somewhere. I mean, at this point, even going to juvenile detention would have been better. So let me know. And I'm serious. I have no idea how that works. And I'm thankful I don't know. But at the same time, it doesn't help me too much here. But back to Jamie, because he said every time the cops took him back home, he felt like they were stabbing him in the back every time. Every time they threatened to put him in juvie, every time they took him back to his mom. So he has no trust in the law. And I don't know about now, but at this point in his life, his young life, he really just feels helpless. There's nobody willing to help him. And he said his dad knew he continued to run away. His dad knew he was running away, but again, Jamie was hiding the truth from him, so he didn't know why Jamie was running away. And in the same sense, wouldn't Dad say, what is going on? Why are you doing this? But I don't know. So then Evil Lives Here tells us that one day Kimberly went too far, which of course she did, because we are in Evil Lives Here. We're watching a new episode. But Jamie tells us that one day he's playing in his mom's room. And he knew she didn't like anybody in his room. Again, mistakes were made all the way around. But she's mad. He's in his room and she completely loses her composure that she is wont to do whenever, anger gets the best of her. And she proceeds to beat him. And she starts hitting him, whatever, and she gets him onto the ground and then starts banging his head against the floor. And his vision starts going black, and he thought his mom was killing him. He thought this was it. I'm dead. Mom's finally broke. But she did let him go, and he ran. He ran from the house, finally got away enough, I guess, far enough away. He called his dad to come get him, and he said at that point, I'd had enough. He told his dad everything. Jamie and Brian are sent together during this part, and he says they've got a handful of pictures of of Jamie with the marks from where his mom beat him. And Brian says, as horrific as it is, these pictures are probably the most important pictures I've ever taken in my life. It enabled him to take action and get Jamie away from her. Basically is what it all boils down to. Again, he had to wait till Jamie was physically hurt until the cops would step in. And he did pull Jamie away from his mother. Now, Jamie is telling his dad. So they're talking to each other at this point. Less about us, more about each other. And this is a very, very touching moment, because you could see the emotions on both men's face as they are talking. But Jamie's telling his dad the reason he didn't tell him all the years of abuse is that if Brian found out, Kimberly would know Jamie told him, and she had threatened to kill him if he ever told anybody about the abuse, and he believed that. Then Brian says that for him, even to this day, the guilt is still very heavy, and they're back and forth, and Jamie tells him, don't feel guilty, I don't blame you, there's nothing you could have done, blah, blah, blah. And Brian says, honestly, 100%, he did everything he could. He was just bound by laws that he couldn't step in, whatever. So it's a very touching moment between both of them. Kind of a moment where they're getting to kind of mend some parts of them that they've had to deal with. So Brian regained custody of Jamie, and then in that same instance, don't know when, why, or how, but Kimberly also lost custody of Zach. Oh my God, I went blank. So, and Evil Lives Here says that during the custody battle for the final son, Luke, is when Kimberly snapped. So now we hear that Jamie had weekend visits, every other weekend visits or whatever, and he went basically because he wanted to see Luke. So Luke was a baby. I don't know how old, but I know Luke was a baby. And Zach was gone, so he was pretty much in the house all by himself. So Jamie was going and just spending some time with his younger brother, playing with him, whatever. He said, but he was as worried as he was about Luke, he was also trying to live a normal life for the first time ever, And I think he has a lot of guilt there, but I don't really know why. But it's, Jamie talks about the babysitter. So Kimberly had hired this lady, her name was Cherry, to come in and babysit Luke. And Cherry kind of got caught in the middle between Luke's dad and Kimberly. But Jamie says Cherry was a genuinely nice person. And she adored and loved Luke. Like, there was no doubt she adored that baby. And they're looking at Cherry's picture. And Brian talks about Cherry as well. Don't really know how Brian knew her, but either way, Brian talks about Cherry. And he says that she was a pure soul. And he couldn't help but look at her as the martyr for all of them. And I know that's not good for Miss Cherry. So Evil Lives Here tells us right after that, that on June 18, 2010, Cherry Walker disappeared. So now we're hearing a story from Brian about the day he received a call from Kimberly's mother. I guess they've all stayed close. I mean, there is still a grandson, so maybe he stayed close to. Maybe her parents weren't quite as crazy as she was. I don't know. But Kimberly's mother calls Brian to tell them that Cherry's body had been found out in the country and her remains had been burned. And Brian says, from the beginning, Kimberly was the #1 suspect. Apparently, Cherry had been summoned by CPS over the hearing of the custody battle for Luke. And in an attempt to prevent Cherry from testifying, she killed her. So, I'm going to read these. These are Kimberly's versions of event as told to us by Brian. Kimberly says she picked up Cherry Walker to have dinner just to discuss the testimony in the upcoming CPS trial. Kimberly says Cherry had a seizure and stopped breathing. I mean, what was she supposed to do? So then she decided to take a drive. I guess Cherry's dead body was in the car with her. And had to figure out what to do. And in the process decided she needed to get rid of the body. So she drove Cherry out into the country, took some lighter fluid out of the back of her car, doused Cherry, and set her on fire. Kimberly was arrested and charged with capital murder. And Jamie was even summoned to testify in this trial against her. So they were bringing in all the kids that could testify about what kind of mother she was and how she treated the kids, the history of abuse, etc. And he tells us this was the last time he ever saw her when he took the stand. So he said when he got up, because when you get there and they have to tell you to point to so-and-so to prove that you know who they are. So he said when he had to point to Kimberly and say he knew her, she looked broken beyond repair. And according to Jamie, he said he remembered her eyes. He said they were still, cold, and lifeless. And all he saw was the eyes of a murderer. Now we're actually getting some footage of the trial and some closing arguments. And the same prosecutor, she was a bad bitch. But Kimberly Cargill was given the death penalty for Cherry Walker's murder. And Jamie comes back on and tells us that he didn't realize how much of an impact his testimony would have towards her case. He kind of felt bad because he doesn't ever want anybody to die because of him. But at the same time, he felt justice had been served when he told him and his brothers told their stories of years of abuse. And he said it was finally at an end. And we learn that Jamie really struggled after sentencing. After all is said and done, you got to think he's still a young kid. He is still suffering. He still has to deal with the after effects of a mother being a murderer. And he started acting out in school. He started getting in fights. He was fighting with his father too. And he didn't want to go to counseling or therapy. Obviously, that would have been the right decision and something that was offered to him a lot. And he didn't want it. So instead of therapy, he took heroin. It's not funny. And I don't mean it to be funny. He just needed to be numb about everything around him that was going on. But eventually, and I don't know how long he stayed, in this state before he realized that he needed to turn his life around, because the last thing he wants to do is become his mother. That's a pretty good motivator to get yourself cleaned up and get your life in line. And he did. And he said that he went to rehab. He's worked really hard to build a career and a life for himself. So he went to culinary school and he graduated with honors. And he is currently, just found out, I guess, or just had a baby. So he's now a father. And he says he's going to make sure his son has everything he never had. And he's going to make sure he's loved and cared for. That he and his partner were going to make sure that this baby had everything in life that he needed. So now Evil Lives Here tells us, and this is at the time of airing in 2018, but Kimberly was still on death row awaiting execution. And Jamie and Brian look at a current picture of Jamie in prison, right? And this goes back to the beginning where Jamie says that he is asked all the time, does he want to go see her? Does he, want to see his mother again? And he tells them he has no interest. He wants to move on with his life, forget about her and that ever happened. And it's a chapter he's closed. He's moving forward. It's, great for him. And he says that his mother sends him, or has sent him, as of 2018, 30 to 40 letters while she's incarcerated. And he says in all her ramblings and everything that he reads, it reminds him that she is where she belongs. Okay, so now let's go to Google and look this up a little bit. And I see what I can find out about Kimberly Diane Cargill. So the first site that comes up is murderpedia.com. And what I find out here is that Kimberly Cargill was born November 30th, 1966 in Mississippi. She was 43 years old and lived in Texas when she killed Cherry on June 18th, 2010. Cherry was 39 years old at the time of her death. And from the site, and I quote, in the summary of incident section, subject did not want the victim to testify against her in a child protective case. Subject told the victim she would come and get her and hide her so she would not be required to testify because of the subpoena. Subject claims the victim had a seizure and quit breathing while they were driving. She drove her to a country road, doused the victim with lighter fluid, and set her clothes on fire. Subject then left the scene. End quote. Then on cinemaholic.com, in an article titled, Where is Kimberly Cargill Now? Dated December 2nd, 2021, I learned a few things. One, that Luke was 4 years old at the time of this incident. So Cherry, he was 4 years old and Cherry was watching him. He was just a baby. Cherry had a learning disability, but loved Luke and took great care of him. Cherry had a heart of gold. So it sounds like, too, that Miss Cargill probably took advantage of the disability. An autopsy confirmed that Cherry had been asphyxiated before being doused in lighter fluid and burnt. on a website I had never been to before. It is kmfx.com. The article is titled, Meet Kimberly Cargill on Texas Death Row for Setting the Babysitter on Fire. This article is dated July 11th, 2023. And honestly, it was the last thing I could find that's closest to date here. So I couldn't find anything more relevant. And I quote, the results of Cherry's autopsy would be unsatisfying. The method of her death was undetermined. Cherry's eyes showed small bleeds that would be components of asphyxiation. However, since she was found face down, it could not be determined if the position of her body caused those bleeds. Cargill would use this to claim that Cherry died of a seizure, causing Cargill to panic and burn Cherry's body on the side of the road. It should be noted here that Cargill was a registered nurse at the time. What would a normal nurse do in these circumstances? Certainly not what Cargill did. And I'm still reading from the article. So, gotta love the touch of humor. Even though the state could not determine the ultimate manner of Cherry's death, a jury did find Cargill guilty of capital murder, and Cargill was sentenced to death by lethal injection. She has sat on death row since and is currently 57 years old. Even though Cargill lost her Supreme Court appeal in 2010, she does not currently have a set execution date. End quote. So that's really all I'm seeing about like I said, I couldn't find anything. That was from 2023. As far as I can tell, she's still on death row in Texas. She's just the worst kind of mother. Just abusive. I read multiple times that the children testified to that fact in court. And I also read that, like I said, she took advantage of Cherry's disability to the point where she didn't even pay her for babysitting Luke. And if she did, Cherry could be there all night and get maybe $20. So just little things like that. Cherry's family was very, very unhappy with Kimberly, as they should be. So everything I could find on Cherry to end on the victim here, which the victim obviously is the children as well, but they actually survived. And I honestly thought this story was going to be where she killed one of her children. So I don't know how I feel about that, because I feel like the story was like the children, and then the babysitter's dead. So it was just, bam, smacking me in the face. Didn't know what to think about it. But the actual victim, the one that lost her life, Cherry, everything I read, everything I saw says she was a sweet, loving woman who adored baby Luke. And they said she was just a pure soul. So it's very unfortunate that her life ended up the way it did. Honestly, that somebody like Kimberly comes into your life and completely just destroys it. But to know that Cherry lost her life just because Kimberly didn't want her to testify. I mean, what are we, the mob? It's just so heartbreaking and, I don't know, unnecessary, just whatever. So what is your thoughts? What do you think about that story? I think we have come across one of the worst parents. I'm glad that her children, I didn't look them up. I don't like to infringe on their peace. Luke and Zach and the other two children, because Brian had one and she had one, were not ever mentioned. So there's 4 children that their stories peripherally told, and I didn't look more into it because it's their life. So we'll let them be. But I'm glad that they, have been able to move on, meaning that Cherry did not hurt them. I mean, not Cherry. I'm so sorry. meaning Kimberly did not hurt these children, and they at least have a chance. And I hope they're doing well. And I hope Cherry's family is doing well as well. And on that note, guys, this was a rough one. Just for the fact that I struggled in every aspect. I'm going to have to be doing a lot of editing, clipping, and cleaning. So wish me luck. Anyways, until next time, guys, I appreciate you being here. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.